All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Linda Durhack, the Energy and Climate Outreach Associate at Illinois Extension, and I will be your moderator for this session. Today, we will be learning about safety for utility scale battery storage systems and navigating new statewide siting requirements. As always, this webinar series is hosted in partnership with Prairie Rivers Network, and I'd like to thank both Randall Watts and Mike Delaney for all of their support in coordinating this webinar with me. We've also partnered with Illinois APA to offer CM credits for this webinar. So, first, I'll go over some general guidelines before speaker introductions. We are recording this webinar. You will get a link to the recording and contact information for the speakers in the next few days, along with slides. You can always find local government education webinars on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. We will have 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. And for certified planners that have joined us, this webinar is worth 1 CM credit thanks to the American Planning Association Illinois chapter. You can log into myapa@planning.org and search by the webinar title or event number 932-8007 to find the event. Okay, again, thank you all for being here. It is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker. Upashana Roy is the Land Use and Energy Planner and Program Coordinator at the Great Plains Institute. She supports GPI's efforts to help communities and non-energy stakeholders find solutions that balance local needs with renewable energy development, focusing on planning and permitting processes at both the local and state levels. Upashana holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Michigan, where she collaborated with state siting authorities to establish best practices for siting utility scale renewable energy and battery storage systems. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. Michelle, would you like me to share the slides online, or would you like to present from your side?
You can go ahead and share.
Perfect. I seem to have disabled sharing on my side. Yeah, it's showing host is disabled, attendee screen sharing. Ah, all right. Can everybody see the screen?
That looks great.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for this slight delay. Hello, everyone. My name is Upashana Roy. I'm the Land Use and Energy Planner at the Great Plains Institute, and I'm going to give a very succinct introduction to what has been happening with planning for battery energy storage in Illinois. A lot has been happening in terms of planning and permitting this kind of technology. So we'll just before I start off exactly on what this word means, I would like folks to do a little, I would like to know the room better. I have a polling question ready. Michelle, if you can pull that up, just to understand where folks are in terms of having this technology come in their locality. Um, yeah, Michelle, if you could just like pull that up, um, and we can have a couple of minutes for people to answer that. Great. Sorry, I had to stop sharing the screen in order to see the answers, but it's great. Like we are seeing a lot of people having active proposals. 36 per person. Informal, yeah. New proposals are coming in. It's great to see that. But there's quite a big percentage of people just saying they have not seen it coming. And I'll go over why that's happening. But yeah, I think we have reached critical mass. And we can stop. We can share. Yes, I have to share the results over here. But as you can see, 35, wait, almost 60% of the folks have seen this in this community, and 62 people voted. So it's great. That means that folks need to know the information. So glad to be in the room and talking about it. I'm going to share my screen again.
We can still see your screen.
Oh, I can't see my screen. I'm so confused. Where is the screen? Okay, I'm gonna just share this again. There you go. Sorry about the hiccup, guys. And thank you so much for your patience on sitting with me on this. All right, we'll just start. So, what exactly is BESS? BESS, by what is currently defined in the regulation and law in Illinois, is under the term of energy storage system. So you'll see the acronym ESS coming up a lot. So what it essentially means is technology that is commercially available, capable of absorbing energy and storing it for a period of time to be used for later use. And then they go on to describe the type of storage system technology that could be used. So there is electrochemical, thermal, electromechanical technologies, and the way they are connected to the grid is usually either through the customer's meter or interconnected to the grid behind its own meter. So that is how it is defined within the regulation. What we are seeing happening commercially, like the commercial available technology, is the battery storage system. So, like the BESS, the B means battery energy storage system. That is what we're seeing coming in. So, a lot of regulations, a lot of zoning ordinances will probably mention BESS zoning, zoning for BESS, and that encompasses that energy storage system definition that is there in the regulation. For utility scale planning, we usually think about two metrics: the megawatt, which is the power, that is the amount of energy it can store. Um, And the megawatt hour is the duration at which it can dissipate that energy into the use in which it is getting used. So whether it's into the grid or whether it's for resilience benefits in your communities, is there a peak load happening? That's where you will be able to understand that so much megawatt hour of battery in your community will be able to support that kind of uh, necessity. Now, when you think about the term by itself, like battery energy storage system, it's kind of scary, isn't it? It's not really new land use when you think about it. When I think about it as a planner, it shares a lot of attributes with a lot of familiar storage facilities that we see in rural communities. Um, for example, like grain elevators. This is a picture that my colleague Brian Ross took in rural Iowa. It was just next to a private house, and it's a part of the rural fabric. And we never question, like it is defines the rural landscape, and it stores grain. It takes uh, the grains from one point to another. Communities have long accommodated these kind of um, energy and commodities for later use. There is propane tanks as well, and when we think about the risks and um, the health and emergency, the health and the safety risks involved, the emergency response that is a part of the these kind of different storage facilities and use cases. That's where the primary differences lie in terms of land use perspective. In terms of the characteristics of a battery energy storage system, it's essentially typically a modular container that's arranged in rows of concrete pads with around footprint of uh, point 0.1 acres per megawatt. This picture that you can see is like a 6 megawatt lithium ion BESS with a little bit of a cooling unit that you can see in the back. And yeah, it's a fairly low profile structure by itself. um, it only needs periodic maintenance visit. It's usually for replacing the cells that are present within this container, um, or to do maintenance within the system. It has HVAC units and cooling systems. And yeah, there is no water that is involved in the operation of this unit. But yeah, they're usually arranged in rows, and they have a separation distance, and I'll go into that later on, that you need to maintain. So why are we having this webinar today? Why is this such a topic that we have to discuss, and how is this helping communities to become resilient, right? Um, the I know folks in the room would know this. The Clean and Reliable Grid Affordability Act was enacted in early January, and the operative compliance date stands in June 1st. Um, this act establishes a target that the state has for a cumulative nameplate capacity. That's that um, megawatt power, remember, that we were talking about in the earlier slide. That's what it has established, that they would want a 3 gigawatt uh, sorry yeah 3 gigawatt initial target that they want by December 31st of 2030. So counties who already have transmission lines should see a lot of traction coming in over the coming years. There is also a huge industrial load growth that is happening because of data centers that are coming in, and that would put an overall um, pressure on the grid in terms of how the electricity gets used in non-industrial sectors or residential sectors. So it's really important to get these kind of technologies to be a part of the grid so that it can off-take that load that is supposed to happen when industrial growth comes in. So one of the how battery energy storage essentially works is that it gets connected to either a generating source. So a lot of times communities will see battery energy storage systems getting sited with solar and wind. So it is a cyclic system when solar or wind acts in terms of generating electricity. Batteries stay there in order to take that extra energy that the solar farm cannot put into the grid. So it stores it. And when there is a peak, when it's noon and everyone wants to turn on their AC, that's when, during the summers, of course, and heating during the winters, that's where battery energy storage comes in and puts that extra energy that it stored from renewable energy back into the grid and is able to reduce that peak uh, rate that you get in your utility bill when you use your appliances during that time. Um, the grid that we talk about is very old. This kind of systems, when they become a part of the grid, it really helps in not having to do extremely costly upgrades, which would obviously come down to the community. So it just helps in making the grid stronger, helping in building that resiliency and lowering down costs overall for communities. And yeah, it also helps with like integrating clean energy. Like I said, it gets usually cited with a lot of solar and wind so that they can take that energy out and store it. And it because it's a fairly it's a very stable system. It does not really create any pollution, or in its operational stage usually does not create any public health impacts. As you can see in this 24-hour electricity dispatch, you can see how the solar generation curve and the battery state of charge and peak and the off peak is related. So when the time increases in terms of like peak, you can see that the discharge is going out to support that. And it's a solar rooftop system and an energy storage system. This graph shows that. So, the generation and that storage, both of them are helping in bringing it into a much more stable demand curve. That's that black line that goes through the thing, through the through the completely forgot what it's called. Anyway, you see the graph. Let's go into planning and permitting for this. I am a land use planner. This is like my area of expertise. And like I said, it's not really a unique land use per se. We are seeing this coming in because of this huge uh, loads that are coming into the grid. Um, Otherwise, they usually existed as supporting storage of electricity from they get co-located with uh, generation essentially. The utility scale battery energy storage system is coming in to support the grid essentially. Um, most like I said, like most of the regulatory and permitting process parallel all the existing land uses, all of the storage land uses and the energy industrial land uses that we spoke about earlier. And there are already regulations for propane tanks and agricultural chemicals and products. Um, these kind of frameworks of how you treat these storages can be replaced for, like, can be brought also for battery energy storage, um, and can be adapted, focusing on the main areas, which is setback, fire safety access, noise limit, drainage, and screening. Those are like the main community concerns that we have been hearing in terms of citing battery energy storage. Um, and as you can see from the figure over here, um, these are like the potential impacts that folks have been saying. And it's a fairly restricted, like, you probably will not be able to get access to battery energy storage, like a local residential person will not be able to get in and access into it. But you will be having all the standards within your zoning regulations to make it uh, a part of your community, and because you already have storage in your community. This is just a different kind. It's for electricity. That's the most simple thing that you can think about. um, Now, with the act that came in January, these are the mandatory technical siting standards that came in for zoning battery energy storage. So the setbacks that we are seeing from homes, from property lines, and from public right of way, they're all set in the regulations, and local governments have to comply with this. There is a waiver option, but it has to be negotiated with property owners, and it can be reduced at that time. There's a fencing requirement of having a minimum 7 feet, and going up to maximum 20 feet. And for noise regulation, the law is saying that look into the noise standards that is placed by the Illinois pollution control boards. And when operational, after operational, you can do a one-time sound measuring testing. If it's a very big concern in your community, but the noise that essentially comes out is a hum of the HVAC system that it has, and that's pretty much it in terms of like, I've been to sites of battery energy storage, and that's essentially the only noise that you can hear while you're on the site. Um, the permitting process is pretty much similar to how you see large industrial permitting process to go. Uh, you know, Site plans must include property lines, roads, physical features of the battery energy storage, landscape changes, zoning designation. Um, Most of the time, I've seen battery energy storage getting cited in ag or industrial zoning under CUP, like conditional use permits or special use zoning. And often in a lot of ordinances, folks mention that clear out vegetation till this much direction as a landscape change, as a precautionary measure. Um, there's also the electrical part of the documentation that is required for battery energy storage. So the layout, the components, the interconnection, disconnects, everything that should be these should be provided to the local government unit. Um, Again, like, very similar in the permitting process is very similar to, excuse me, industrial and generating facilities. So having public hearing, one public hearing, and it must be within that timeline that they have set. There are a couple of timelines that we have to think about while dealing with this. It must conclude within that 60 days of filing an application. The building permit must be either approved or denied within 60 days. And if there are no actions, it will be automatically approved by the state. Decision timeline would be, again, within that 30 days after the hearing end of the application. Now, a lot of questions come around the risk that is associated with citing facility like this. Now we have to remember that these are very sensitive electrochemical um, modules, which are fairly costly and very, very risky. Um, just like a lot of storages that we have, like propane tanks. All of these facilities for battery energy storage have layers of code wrapped within its entire package. So in this graphic, and I use this graphic everywhere, you can see how each code is embedded within the battery storage module. And all the biggest, like the code that you have to remember is the NFPA 855, which is the fire safety standard for separation, ventilation, hazard mitigation. Referring that code to within your ordinance will like solidify your community from standards, at least for placing BESS and like mitigating BESS, because that is the industrial standard, and usually like compliance must be done with industrial standards. From system level safety, the UL 9540 is also referred, because there's a system level safety training, system level safety testing that is a part of the NFPA 855 for a hazard as a hazard mitigation strategy. So all of these codes are wrapped in a bundle for within the PES module, and if you refer to those codes within your planning and zoning ordinance, you're pretty much set. So what is essentially required for a local government for this risk that we are talking about, that is related with battery energy storage? Requiring a proof of NFPA 855 compliance, requiring an emergency response plan, um, requiring a commissioning report before operation. Now, this is something that will come through the state. So requiring that as an application process. Again, all the part of electrical diagrams and equipment specs, all of that should be provided to the community. And a very important thing that has been added to NFPA 855 in its latest version is to have a strong coordination with local fire departments. Usually, the fire departments are voluntary fire departments, so NFPA 855 has made it like has told that you should have annual trainings of the volunteer fire department, so that if there are any changes, the county will be notified, as well as the folks who will be there as first responders in case of an emergency will be trained every year annually in case any risk does take place. Like I said, most like we industrial uses usually have a lot of standards for adhering to most of the safety regulations in the commercial markets, like storage tankers, industrial storage tankers were used for petrochemical purposes, which is in this picture. They have like UL 142 or API 650, which is set as a minimum requirement for safety and durability for these kind of structures. So I think that's like one of the things that we have to continuously remind ourselves, that there are codes and there are compliances that these systems need to have. Like there's a benchmark that they have to be there, but it's the communities who have to deal with the if there is a risk associated, like if there is a risk associated, if and when that happens, what to do. So, and that is where NFPA does a really good job of laying out of like having an emergency response plan, having a logbox, having a good distance from racks, and having a coordinated training plan for local fire departments. Um, there are other safety concerns that come from the risks associated with BESS. The term that the risk that we're talking about usually is thermal runaway. Now, what is that? Um, the battery energy storage system essentially are racks of cells. Uh, Usually, what happens is that there might be a little bit of chemical, uh, electrochemical issues within the pack, and that will go for lighting up another pack, and then another pack, and it goes on. And that's why it ends up starting a cascading effect, and that's why it's called a thermal runaway. But it's not as scary as it sounds. It's usually gets contained within the system when a thermal runaway starts. But the concerns that come from it is the radiant heat when uh, thermal runaway occurs. When these kind of BESS facilities are installed close to structures, have vegetation around, or is within public areas, it can present a risk to the properties that are surrounding that area. But again, the codes, these are calculated, they're very well calculated, and usually these are determined within the codes on like measuring the safety distance while siting these facilities. um, and again, like the state has already mandated that 150 feet from property lines. And if you go into NFPA 855, you would see that is exactly what the separation distance that has been referred to within that code, and the state has taken that up. So water and soil contamination is also another point that comes within the environmental concerns around battery energy storage. They usually, I mean, when it's operational under normal operating conditions, they don't, like, it's a stable container. They do not pose any risk to soil or groundwater. Um, it could occur during fire suppression. Um, if there is, again, water is not used. When it is usually used to suppress the surrounding vegetation or like keeping the surrounding cool. Um, but there are other suppression agents that are coming in that are getting used, and drainage plans are very important during this time. And again, the regulation does a really good job of like laying down the requirements for doing it. And site design, containment, and emergency planning becomes a very important topic if that is if communities are considering using water or using suppressant agents for taking care of fire suppression. Another concern for thermal runaway is the gaseous contamination. Um, like I said, the batteries are placed in that rack. So the first thing that happens is usually a gas will start building up. When that gas starts building up, there is a detector within the system, like the container, and they open up, and then they let the gas come out. There's a certain amount, I think it was like 14% of the total amount of gas that gets accumulated that triggers that opening of the container, and that gets dissipated into the environment. And uh, these what happens is that when this gas, like the huge um fire that happens is when it gets trapped, and we open it with intention that we don't have, when we have education of like not knowing what to do with that system, that's when we see a lot of fire taking place. But usually systems are ready to take care and be prepared before it can cause something within the community. Um, Again, like multiple codes are there. Then there is usually a very standard way of approaching battery storage in terms of firefighting approach. It's more on containment, more on being defensive, um, and letting the fire burn out while protecting the surrounding areas is usually the way firefighting strategy is used for um, if there is a battery energy storage fire. Um, and Again, like exposure control is the main focus usually when it comes to these kind of fires. But Richard, who is a co-presenter, will be able to give you more on how boots on ground folks are actually handling it. And I'll end my presentation with the another question that comes up with battery storage is how do you decommission this thing? Again, the regulation does a good job of laying out what communities should be doing, requiring a decommissioning plan at the time of application that ensures like the full removal of the battery energy storage system, restoration of the site. There is less than uh, 18 months of the end of life or abandonment that is placed in the regulation. And also to have a reasonable amount of effort for recycling or reusing of the components should also be included in the decommissioning plan. Usually, the plan is backed by financial assurance. So it could be a bond or an escrow, and it is usually equal to the full decommissioning cost minus the salvage value. And you would need a prepared, you would need it prepared by a licensed engineer, and it like the financial assurance is phased over time. Um, and this estimates gets updated periodically. I think every annually, and I could be wrong. I think CRGA pretty much specifies that you have to do it every annual. Like you have to see the increase in like the cost estimate every year. Um, and the law also establishes like the abandonment triggers of like, is it extended non-operational, is there non-payment, which enforces communities to remove the project if it's no longer active. Um, but yeah, this is a very quick rundown of how battery energy storage works and how you can plan for it. I am happy to take questions. Um, but yeah, thank you so much
Thank
for listening in.
Thank you so much for the excellent overview. We will have some time for Q&A at the end, so please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A so we can get to those. With that, I will introduce our second speaker, Captain Richard Birt, who is the founder at Solar and Fire Education, S.A.F.E. He retired at the end of 2020 as a firefighter-captain for Las Vegas Fire and Rescue. He now focuses on the educational platform he founded, which provides free training for firefighters on how to safely mitigate a fire incident involving solar and battery storage systems. His curriculum has already trained over 1,000 firefighters in California on preparedness and response to solar and battery storage fires. Turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you and good morning. I'm glad I'm here. It got a little technical. I'm a firefighter, not a tech guy, and joining the webinar was a bit of an effort. But can everybody hear me? Hopefully, yes.
Yes.
And thank you and good morning. So let's jump right in. I haven't got much time. My class is 6 hours. I just got back from Vermont, where they had over 100 volunteer firefighters. and I'm off to Massachusetts to teach at their academy because they're getting a lot of these batteries put into their neighborhoods, right? So let's jump in. So first of all, I've been teaching this for a long time. I've teach thousands of firefighters every year. And what we talk about is basically breaking down what happens if it malfunctions. So at this point, there's code and there's very good regulation on this, but stuff fails. Being a firefighter for 30 years on a very busy unit, we didn't sit around the station because stuff failed. Even though they said it wasn't going to fail, it did fail. So let's jump in and put some comparisons out there because the trouble is there's a lot of misinformation, and my job is to go in and talk to the firefighters about the misinformation. But it's also very important for everybody in the community who have a large storage battery in their system and in their community should know about this. So, first thing I concentrate is on chemistry. So, the large battery storage we're talking about today uses a chemistry that's called LFP, lithium iron phosphate. And out of the group of chemistries that make a lithium ion battery, it's the safest so far of what we've got. Now, if you've got an electric vehicle, you might be getting into a vehicle that has a chemistry that's not as safe. And NCA and NMC are two other chemistries out there. But for large storage, right now, you've got to understand that that is one of the safest chemistries out there. And it's safe because it's very stable. It likes to be charged and discharged. It has a thermal runaway temperature that everybody talks about. Basically, when it does it catch on fire, around 518 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's on the higher end of these different chemistries. So number one, you got this chemistry coming in. What happens if that chemistry in the cell, because basically these units, these batteries are basically a cell, and then they take these cells and they make a module, put a bunch of cells together, and those modules then make a battery. So it starts cell, module, battery. So concentrating on the cell, we got this cell, they put a bunch together and make a module, module makes a battery. What happens is basically if it goes wrong, what does it do? What does it off gas? So again, LFP chemistry is the chemistry. What we know for a fact from doing all the burn tests is it produces a lot of hydrogen. And the good thing about these large storages that are going into your area, number one, is they're putting them outside. For that reason, they know it produces a lot of hydrogen, which is a very explosive gas. So they say, right, we're not going to put this inside a building because we've learned that's not good. So I'm telling you right off the bat, today, this morning, if you have a battery storage, large battery storage going into a building which is enclosed in a building, don't do it. Simple as that. So if you have a large battery, best system, and they say, right, we're going to put it in this really nice building with a roof and doors and windows, go, no. If they say, right, we're going to put this large battery storage system on a concrete pad in a field, it's contained with panels that open if it senses hydrogen, then you give it a thumbs up. So right there, it's a very, very good guidance for you. Very simple. I tell that around the world. So take that. Secondly, so it produces a lot of hydrogen. So again, hydrogen dissipates because it's lighter than air. So you put this big container out in a field on a concrete pad, and if there is hydrogen, which is very dangerous if it's enclosed, is going up and out and away. So we're not worried about that. There are other gases in there that are poisonous. And if your chair or your couch or your mattress is on fire, it's poisonous too. And that's why we wear a self-contained breathing apparatus. When we're fighting a fire in a home, we wear an apparatus that protects us from that smoke. When I teach firefighters, when they respond to a large battery storage, because they do catch on fire, and they have, what we do is we have the equipment to protect ourselves. So at this point, just because it's a box, a large, let's say, sea container in the middle of a field on a concrete pad, it doesn't mean we can't protect ourselves. It means we have the tools to protect ourselves. It's just understanding when to use those tools. So at this point, we wear our SCBAs. So what I'm trying to get at is this: the fire service has the tools to deal with these large storage units. We have the tools. It's just a matter of training and a matter of putting it in a perspective so we can respond responsibly and we can do what we are basically sworn to do. So the firefighters' goals is firefighter safety first, because if we're dead, we can't save you. So firefighter safety, it's civilian life safety, it's incident stabilization. Let's get this stabilized, and property conservation. So when we look at BESS, the large battery storage, we do the same thing as a house or anything else. We say, right, firefighter safety, what's involved? So firefighter safety, we have, if it's burning, our self-contained breathing apparatus to protect ourselves. But it's really important at that point also to say where the smoke's going. So this is a conversation, and I'm giving you information. This is an awareness class from a firefighter to firefighters, but to everybody else now in this webinar. Go to those meetings and say, if this is placed here, what is the prevailing wind? And what are the plans for shelter in place? So if the smoke does drift over a community, what are we looking at? So shelter in place, prevailing wind, what is the plan for that? That's another great point to bring up on the discussion. So we're wearing SCBAs, you aren't wearing SCBAs, and as the smoke moves, it dilutes just like anything else. So at this point, look at the distance, prevailing wind, and what's the plan? That's what I tell the fire service. So another point is, what do you do if it catches on fire and there are flames showing from this battery unit? Now, most of these units, like coming back from Vermont, most of these volunteer firefighters don't have this training. So it's critical to start asking, can we get this training? It's critical to sit with the developers and say, listen, we have a volunteer-based fire department here. It's not like when I teach people in LA County or San Francisco, where you have 50 or 60 firefighters turn up on scene. You may have, on a responding unit in a volunteer area, you may have the person that works in the grocery store, and you may have a school teacher responding in a truck to a fire. So again, it's starting to ask questions about what is your response area and what are you capable of doing? So I talk to firefighters about that. So in the sense of, if there is a fire, it's pretty basic for the fire service. That's the good thing about these large battery storage systems. Number one, you protect yourself with an SCBA, you've got that. Number two, if there is a fire in one of these units, because you're going to have a box with a cell, modules, make a battery, and then you're going to have another box next to it that's got a cell, modules, and battery, and makes a battery. So if this one box is on fire, what do? Well, our job is to put water on a fire. Well, with these, what you do is you don't put water on the fire. You don't put the wet stuff on the red stuff. That's what we're taught. What you do is you let that burn, and your job in the fire service is to protect the exposure. So at this point, I want the community to get a picture of what, if something goes wrong, you got firefighters turning up. It doesn't matter how many you got. The most important part is to recognize you protect yourself. You make sure the smoke is going in a direction away from a community, or if it's going into a community, you make sure they're notified to stay in shelter in place. Stay in your home. Number three, don't put water on that burning box. Basically, keep it and let it burn, and keep the other one from heating up, because you don't want the process happening again. So at this point, those are the fundamentals. The other fundamentals, again, for the firefighters to understand is, when you pull up, where are you going to get water from? Because you're going to let a box burn for a couple of hours. That lithium in one of those large storages is going to burn for a while. You're trying to keep that other box cool. So another question I tell the fire department to ask developers is, where are we getting the water from? Are we getting it from a pond that we can draft out of into our tank and spray on? Is there hydrants? So really important question: prevailing wind, what kind of resources, training, where are we getting the water from, and drainage. Drainage is another important thing. When we flow water to cool a battery with a master stream, we call it a master stream because it's a big hose. It's not a garden hose. We're flowing about 250 gallons per minute. So someone with math, is good at math, figure that out for 2 hours, how many gallons of water it is. That's why it's really important to understand drainage too, because we don't want to make a swimming pool out of the rest of the battery storage. So drainage is really, really important. The point here is we have the tools. We have the SCBA's breathing apparatus. We have the trucks. We can draft out of a pond. We can hook to a hydrant. We can flow a master stream very easily for 2 hours. We do it on lots of other incidences. We can protect people from smoke. We can shelter in place. We've got access to the site. What I'm saying to communities and to the fire service, we now got to train. We understand where we are with this, but we've got to train. And the community, the most important thing for the community members is to put this in perspective. Now, I teach a lot about battery safety, not just large battery storage, because I have an opportunity right now to do a public service announcement. And the public service announcement today is this. Be very concerned about large storage going in. Ask those really, really important questions. But go home, or if you're at home, do a lithium-ion battery audit of all the things in your home that have different chemistry than LFP, that are very dangerous, don't have very good battery management systems, doesn't have any regulation on how it's built, or when it was built, or how it's charged, and how many people are guilty of losing the charger the unit came with and finding another charger online that was half the price. So at this point, what I'm saying to you is do an audit of your home, because the major crisis in the country is not large battery storage. A major crisis in this country that's killing a lot of people with a lithium-ion battery is an unregulated, untested cell that comes in a battery pack for a drill, a vape pen, a vacuum cleaner, you name the 20 or 30 different items in your home. Check and see what kind of manufacturing. Check and see what kind of standards they have. What I'm saying to you is there is an awareness level of lithium-ion batteries. The large battery storage is very important to communities because, on the one hand, yes, the fire service can deal with it, but it's very well regulated. But also, large storage helps to save a lot of lives because the grid are using it to back up their systems because their grids are under load because of the amount of usage. And battery storage is a great way of supplementing the grid so the grid does not go down, especially in emergencies. In Vermont, they have line power down all the time, and they're starting to rely on batteries. So there is a life-saving component. And this is what I tell the firefighters. There's a life-saving component to this. It's not just about getting large storage, some developer making some money by putting large storage in. It's actually good for the community. The thing is, you just have to train on it. You have to be aware of it. But become aware of what's in your house too. When we talk about lithium-ion batteries, become aware of the spectrum of lithium-ion batteries in your world. And if you ask the right questions and you start looking, you can start making your world safer at home, at work. If you're driving a vehicle, ask some important questions about what kind of chemistry and where that car is being charged and what are the dangers, and ask about your battery management systems and ask about the large battery going in your neighborhoods. My point is, I think the fire service has had lack of training with large storage, and large storage has learned from a lot of incidents that have happened or how to make it safer. I think we're on the tail end of the design, except for the chemistry. When they change to a different chemistry and LFP is no longer the chemistry they use and use a safer chemistry, that will be the next tier of safety. But right now, I think the large battery storage industry are doing a great job with, number one, the design, the testing. I think the catch up is getting the firefighters to understand we can deal with this. We have the tools and we know how the chemistry works. We know the strategies and tactics. It's a matter of binding it all together. And I think the communities, if they ask the right questions, we can propel that safety even quicker. So if you go into those meetings with what you're armed with today, especially if you're a firefighter, especially you're in a community, a small community with a small volunteer fire department, it may not be the chief, it may be you in the meeting asking the questions for the firefighters who may not be able to be there for that meeting. So I think it's critical to have these webinars to talk about real risk, real risk, real benefit, and also do your homework on the stuff in your home, because the fire department of New York are stating that that's where you should look first, and take webinars like this and go home and do an audit of your home too. So I know we're going to have a lot of questions. So at this point, I think we're ready for questions.
Yes, thank you so much, Richard, for that presentation. We don't have a lot of time, but we will be sending out their contact information, so you can definitely follow up with them later. We'll go ahead and get started with one question. Does BESS systems have any ground penetration needs for electrical grounding, footings, or otherwise? Could they go on contaminated sites?
You're on mute.
Thanks. We are actually dealing with that question right now. A lot of we have had solar like generation on landfills or brownfields, but battery energy storage brings a different set of regulations, right, in terms of zoning considerations. And we are still figuring it out. I mean, it depends. Landfill is a used by it's a case by case basis on like how the landfill was treated. Is it capped? Is it uncapped? Is it completely like all the hazards has been mitigated? Like what is the situation on ground? It's usually you like case by case. That's what we're seeing in solar. And I expect that would happen for battery energy storage as well, where it will be depending on the site situation. But yeah.
Thank you for that answer. We have a question about the safety of battery storage. This question's for Richard. Is there a known rate of failure for these systems?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, it's a bit like the firefighting service. It's a bit chaotic. We know by NIFA's reports that the main starts in a home are in the kitchen, the basement, and the garage. We know that, but that's years and years and years of fire reporting. This is a new technology. All I'm saying to the industry and to civilians is stuff does go wrong. If you put the training in place right now, because it is a new technology, and do the training and ask the important questions and be ready, then I think we're going to be way ahead of the game. But no, it hasn't been around long enough.
Thank you. This question's for Upashana. Are you seeing regulation permitting for these typically handled by special use permits?
Yeah, I mean, I work mostly in the Midwest, and that's how we are seeing it coming. Sometimes it is placed as a primary used in industrial zone. It's usually when the ag land comes in, that's when a special use permit or a conditional use permit is placed in. But for industrial zone, I think we usually don't see that kind of permit come in.
All right, thank you so much. And we are close to the end of time. We have one more question here. How would an area receive training from Captain Birt?
Yeah, so basically my website is solarandfireeducation.com. And what happens is I do regional training now. So Massachusetts, I'll be in Massachusetts next week teaching at the Massachusetts Fire Academy, in both academies, in Stowe and in Springfield. So it's kind of a regional training. So the best thing to do is reach out to me. They'll put up my email, and it's kind of at a regional based training where you know you're going to get best systems in. And what I do is try and bring everybody together in that area from the fire service, and it's usually about 6 hour class.
Thank you so much. And we are not specifically endorsing his services, but if you do choose to reach out, please feel free to. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar to everyone who attended, along with contact information so you can follow up with our speakers and get your questions answered. Wish we had more time for Q&A, but I don't want to keep people here. I know we've all got things to get back to, but please join us in late May for another webinar about outdoor recreation, workforce development, and how you can do that in your community for sustainable tourism. So thank you all so much. Thank you again to our speakers, and we will see you next month.